At 6:12 on Christmas Eve morning, my husband stood beside the coffee maker and told me I shouldn't come home that night. "Paige will be here," Daniel said. "The kids want time with their mom. I think the evening will go more smoothly if you're somewhere else." For several seconds, I honestly thought I had misunderstood him. I was 52 years old, standing barefoot in our kitchen in Carmel, Indiana, wearing a faded blue robe and cutting cinnamon rolls into a buttered glass dish. Coffee was dripping into the pot. The Christmas tree lights were still glowing in the family room because neither of us had bothered turning them off before bed. Outside the windows, the neighborhood looked silver with frost. I set the knife down. "Say that again." Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. That was one of his tells. After 11 years of marriage, I knew most of them. Whenever he was about to say something he knew would upset me, his hand went straight to the back of his neck. "Paige is driving in this afternoon," he said. "She's had a difficult year. The divorce, leaving Nevada, moving back to Indiana. Noah and Lily want Christmas to feel comfortable for her. I know Paige is coming." That wasn't news. I had known for almost 3 weeks. I had personally added a chair for her at our dining table. There were 6 settings waiting downstairs: Daniel, me, Paige, Noah, Noah's wife Jenna, and Lily. 2 days earlier, I had spent nearly $300 at the grocery store buying everything for dinner: spiral ham, potatoes, cranberries, heavy cream, eggs, bacon, fresh rolls, green beans, and the sliced mushrooms Noah had become obsessed with putting into vegetables once he decided adulthood required more complicated side dishes. There was even a small wrapped gift for Paige beneath the tree: a vanilla candle and an expensive hand cream. Nothing intimate. Nothing that suggested I was trying to become her friend. I simply didn't believe a woman should sit in my house on Christmas Eve watching everybody else open presents while she had nothing. I looked at Daniel. "So you're inviting your former wife into our home, and your solution is for your current wife to leave?" His expression hardened. "Laura, don't phrase it like that." A short laugh escaped me. "How would you prefer I phrase it? You're making this sound cruel." "Then give me the version where it isn't." He lifted his coffee mug, but never took a drink. "The kids would like one Christmas where their mom doesn't feel like she's walking on eggshells." "Because of me?" "I didn't say that. You said it would be better if I'm not here." He exhaled heavily, as though I had already become unreasonable simply by repeating what he'd said. That sigh bothered me more than I expected. "Can you just give them this one Christmas?" he asked. That stopped me. I turned completely toward him. "One Christmas?" He looked toward the window. I had been married to Daniel for 11 years. When I met him, Lily was 14 and Noah was 17. I had never tried to replace Paige. Never asked either child to call me mom. Never corrected them when they introduced me as their father's wife instead of their stepmother. I knew exactly where the boundaries were, and I had respected them even during periods when Paige herself was barely speaking to Daniel. When Lily spun her Honda Civic into a guardrail during freezing rain on Keystone Avenue, I sat beside her in urgent care until nearly midnight because Daniel was trapped at a sales conference in Chicago. When Noah lost his first job after college, I spent 3 evenings helping him rebuild his resume at our dining room table. I also quietly covered part of the security deposit on his next apartment until he was working again. When Daniel complained about Paige, I was usually the person who stopped him. "She is still their mother," I would say. "Whatever happened between you two doesn't belong on the kids." Apparently, all those years I had spent making room for everybody had eventually created enough space for them to remove me entirely. I folded my arms. "Did Noah ask you to tell me not to come?" Daniel frowned. "They don't want drama." "That isn't what I asked." "Laura, don't interrogate me." "Did Noah ask?" "No, not directly." "Did Lily?" He didn't answer. And somehow, that answer was worse than anything he could have said. My phone was sitting on the counter. For 3 or 4 seconds, I considered calling Lily. I imagined myself asking, "Sweetheart, do you want me at Christmas?" The thought made my stomach turn. I managed operations for a regional credit union and supervised more than 100 people. I had survived my first marriage ending in my 30s. I had helped care for my father through the final years of dementia. I had led my department through a merger that almost erased half of our jobs. I was not about to beg a 25-year-old woman for permission to spend Christmas in my own house. "All right," I said. Daniel blinked. "All right? I heard you." His shoulders dropped. He was relieved. That was the moment something inside me changed. It didn't shatter. It shifted. Some part of me had still believed Daniel would hear himself and stop. That he would laugh awkwardly and say, "This is ridiculous. Forget I said anything." Instead, the man looked grateful that I wasn't fighting him. By 8:35 that morning, I had packed jeans, 2 sweaters, toiletries, socks, and pajamas into a small overnight bag. Daniel appeared in our bedroom doorway. "You could stay downtown," he said, "maybe the Hyatt, order dinner, watch movies, make it a little getaway." I zipped my suitcase. "That sounds lovely." He smiled. A genuine smile. He had completely missed the point. Before leaving, I walked through the dining room. The table looked beautiful. Cream-colored plates. Dark red napkins. Small branches of cedar running down the center. Battery candles tucked between pine cones. 6 places. Mine was still there because I had set the table the night before. I didn't remove the plate. I didn't rearrange anything. At the front door, Daniel kissed my cheek. "Thank you for understanding." I looked at him for a long second. "Oh, I understand more than I did yesterday." Then I walked out. I drove south toward Indianapolis without knowing where I was going. The downtown hotel Daniel had suggested was easy enough to reach. I passed the turn. At the next light, I thought about Angela Ruiz. Angela directed Maple Street Family Center, a small shelter on the east side where I volunteered every few weeks. Earlier that month, she had asked if I could help serve Christmas Eve dinner. I had told her no. "My family will be home." Funny how quickly a perfectly reasonable sentence can expire. I called. She answered after several rings. "Maple Street Family Center, Angela speaking. Are you still desperate for volunteers tonight?" There was a pause. "Laura?" "Yes. Aren't you supposed to be cooking Christmas dinner for half of suburban Indianapolis?" Plans changed. Angela knew me well enough not to immediately ask why. Instead she said, "It is Christmas Eve, I am short 3 volunteers, 2 cases of paper towels, and every remaining ounce of patience. I can bring one of those." "Tell me you mean patience." "No guarantees." She laughed. As I drove toward the city, Angela told me a local television station had called earlier in the week. Central Indiana was under a severe cold snap, and reporters were checking shelter capacity as overnight temperatures continued falling. "They might stop by," she said. "Or they'll forget about us because somebody's inflatable snowman blew into traffic." I barely paid attention. Daniel's sentence was still circling inside my head. "It'll be easier if you're somewhere else." I arrived at the shelter a little after 10. Before I could turn off the engine, my phone buzzed. "Lily. Where are you?" Then another message appeared. "Dad said you decided to give us some family time tonight." I stared at those words. Read them once. Then again. Then a third time. And suddenly the part that hurt the most wasn't being asked to leave. Daniel had rewritten what happened before I had even reached downtown. According to him, I hadn't been removed. I had generously stepped aside. I sat in the parking lot with the engine running and the heater blowing warm air against my legs. For some irrational reason, I felt embarrassed. I hadn't lied. I hadn't done anything wrong. Yet there I was, sitting alone in my SUV on Christmas Eve, feeling like someone had caught me doing something shameful. I called Lily. She answered immediately. "Laura? Did you ask your father to tell me not to come home tonight?" Silence. Then, what? Just answer me. No, of course not. Did Noah? No. I closed my eyes. Through the windshield, I could see Angela carrying a box across the shelter lobby. Lily's voice sharpened. "What exactly did Dad tell you?" "He said you and Noah wanted Christmas with your real mother and that everyone would be more comfortable if I wasn't there." Oh my God. There was no guilty hesitation. No awkward excuse. Just disbelief. "Mom said she was nervous about coming into your house," Lily said. "That's all. She never asked you to leave." Your father said she would feel more relaxed. For who? That was approximately my question. I heard Lily mutter something under her breath. I'm calling him. No. Laura. Don't. Why? Because I'm not making you referee your father's marriage on Christmas Eve. He lied to us. Yes. And he lied to you. Yes. Then why are you still protecting him? That question landed harder than anything Daniel had said that morning. I looked down at my hands. I'm not protecting him. Even I didn't believe myself. Lily's voice softened. Come home. For one moment, I almost did. I imagined walking back through the front door. I imagined Daniel's face. I imagined setting my overnight bag at the bottom of the stairs and taking my seat at the table. Part of me wanted that scene desperately. But I also knew what would happen. Christmas would become a confrontation. Paige would become genuinely uncomfortable. Lily and Noah would be furious with their father. And Daniel would somehow turn my return into the disruption. No, I said, I'm staying here tonight. Where are you? Maple Street Family Center. Angela needed help. Lily gave a tired little laugh. Of course she did. That made me smile. Spend time with your mother. I told her, I mean that. This feels awful. Then don't make it uglier tonight. After the call, I sat there another minute before shutting off the engine. Angela met me at the front desk and looked directly at my overnight bag. That successful of a morning? Do you have an apron? She handed me one. Before I assign you anything, do you need coffee or an attorney? Coffee. Much cheaper. I tied the apron around my waist. Angela watched me. So? I gave her the shortest version possible. My husband asked me to spend Christmas somewhere else because his ex-wife is coming to our house. Angela stared. Your house? Yes. Your husband evicted you from your own Christmas? He would probably describe it as lowering everybody's stress. She handed me a stack of paper plates. Men have invented remarkable vocabulary for terrible ideas. I laughed. I needed to. Maple Street wasn't impressive from the outside. It occupied an aging brick building near a line of small businesses east of downtown. The hall floors didn't match. The ceiling tiles belonged in an elementary school. The lobby always smelled faintly of laundry detergent, burnt coffee, and whatever had been served for dinner. But that afternoon, the building felt alive. Paper snowflakes covered the front windows. Donated toys were stacked against one wall. A neighborhood supermarket had delivered aluminum trays filled with turkey, mashed potatoes, stuffing, and vegetables. Someone had brought 2 artificial Christmas trees, neither standing completely straight. While unpacking rolls, I met Tasha Green. She was 38, quick-eyed, exhausted, and possessed the sort of dry humor that usually takes me 5 minutes to like and 2 more minutes to trust. Her son Caleb was 9. Her daughter Amari was 6. I watched Caleb slide a dinner roll into the pocket of his hoodie. Then another. On the third one, Tasha caught him. If one more piece of bread disappears into that sweatshirt, I'm charging that pocket rent. Caleb grinned. At the far end of the room, Walter Briggs, a 70-year-old retired electrician, was fighting with 3 strands of Christmas lights. He held the knot up like evidence in a criminal trial. This, he announced, is why I wired buildings for 40 years instead of decorating them. Buildings follow rules. Christmas lights are possessed. For the next several hours, I stopped thinking about Daniel. Mostly. I served plates. Refilled coffee. Carried boxes. Helped Amari tape a ripped corner on a gift bag. Nothing dramatic. Nothing heroic. I was simply useful. Around 4:30, my phone vibrated. Lily had sent me a picture. My dining room. My table. My centerpiece. Paige sat near the end in a burgundy sweater. Noah was looking down at his plate. Jenna was beside him. Daniel stood behind Paige with a wine bottle in his hand. The first absurd thing I noticed was that the centerpiece had shifted several inches off center. Daniel never noticed things like that. I always fixed them. A minute later, Noah texted separately. This doesn't feel right without you. I stared at the message. Then typed back. Then love each other tonight. Don't make things worse for my sake. I put the phone away. At 5:43, A loud bang came from the rear corridor. Every conversation stopped. Angela ran past the dining area. Walter immediately dropped the lights and followed. What happened? Back annex. I went after them. Water was already spreading across the floor. It wasn't a cinematic wall of water. There was no giant explosion. Just an old pipe failing at exactly the wrong time on one of the coldest nights of December. Water dripped through a stained ceiling tile. One circuit had already tripped. The refrigerator in the side kitchen went silent. Walter crouched near the breaker panel. Nobody touches this wall. Several families had rooms in that wing. We started moving everything. Duffel bags. Blankets. Prescription bags. Children's coats. Plastic bins. Christmas presents. Angela began calling maintenance contacts. I started calling people too. Daniel had worked in commercial HVAC sales for years, so I knew several contractors through him. My finger hovered over his name. For one stupid second, I almost called. Then I pictured him standing beside our dining table pouring wine while I asked him to rescue another emergency for me. I lowered the phone. No. Instead, I called one of our commercial property clients from the credit union. He connected me with an emergency plumbing company willing to dispatch a crew. The problem was Christmas Eve pricing. They needed a deposit immediately. Angela tried the shelter treasurer. No answer. She tried again. Still nothing. How much? I asked. She looked miserable. $3,600. I opened my wallet. Angela stared at me. Laura. They'll reimburse me. I know they will. So what's the problem? The problem is you're putting $3,600 on your personal card. Would you prefer the pipe keep leaking while we debate my credit limit? She closed her eyes. I am beginning to understand why Daniel describes you as controlling. I stared at her. Her mouth twitched. Too early? Extremely. By 8:30, the leaking line had been isolated. Families from the affected rooms were moved into safer areas. Portable heaters were arriving from a church several blocks away. Then Angela's phone rang. She listened for half a minute and looked at me. Oh no. What? The news crew. I froze. What about them? They're coming. Apparently, the television station was already filming cold weather shelter coverage nearby when someone heard Maple Street had lost part of an annex. Angela checked the time. Maybe 20 minutes. Excellent, I'll become invisible. She looked down at my sweater. A streak of gravy crossed one sleeve. I don't think anyone's going to mistake you for a media spokesperson. At 8:57, headlights swept across the shelter windows. A white news van pulled into the lot. Reporter Camille Ross stepped inside wearing a navy winter coat, boots, and an apologetic expression because she'd tracked salt over the lobby floor. Behind her, a cameraman started unloading equipment. Angela walked toward them. I walked in the opposite direction. My strategy was simple. Stay useful. Stay away from cameras. For approximately 6 minutes, it worked. Camille interviewed Angela about the cold, the broken pipe, displaced families, remaining beds, and whether Maple Street could continue accepting people overnight. Then she interviewed Walter. By that point, he had miraculously untangled the Christmas lights. Personally, I thought that deserved its own segment. I was carrying a box of toiletries when Camille stopped me. Excuse me. I turned. She pointed at the box. Do you work here? No. You're volunteering? Sometimes. What brought you in tonight? I looked across the room at Angela. Angela suddenly became fascinated by a clipboard. Traitor. I was available, I said. Camille smiled. I gathered that. The camera was already aimed in my direction. Immediately, I became aware of how terrible I looked. My hair had escaped the clip at the back of my head. There was gravy on my sweater. One knee of my jeans was damp from kneeling near boxes in the annex. I looked exactly like a 52-year-old woman who had spent Christmas Eve moving strangers' belongings away from a leaking pipe. Which was accurate? Camille asked again. Why did you choose to spend Christmas Eve here? I could have told her everything. My husband removed me from Christmas because his ex-wife was coming. My stepchildren hadn't asked for it. He told everybody the decision had been mine. I could have handed Channel 8 enough family drama for an entire holiday series. Instead, I said, my plans changed this morning. Camille waited. Reporters understand silence. I didn't fill it. Finally, I added, Angela needed people, I was free. That was all she got. Later, she discovered from Angela that I'd covered the plumber's deposit. I cornered Angela near the coffee urn. You told her? She asked how the plumber got here. They're paying me back. I also told her that. Camille overheard us. So you didn't donate $3,600? No. You just fronted it personally because they couldn't reach the treasurer. Yes. She nodded. That's still generous. It is a credit card, not the Nobel Peace Prize. Please keep this in perspective. The cameraman laughed. I immediately wished I hadn't said anything. By 10:30, the crisis was mostly contained. The damaged section was shut down. Families were sleeping temporarily in other rooms and common areas. A nearby church delivered blankets. A neighborhood restaurant sent macaroni and cheese after someone heard what had happened. The shelter looked crowded. Messy. Exhausted. But warm. Before leaving, Camille asked me one final question. What do you take away from a night like tonight? I hated questions like that. They sound easy until a camera is pointed at your face. I nearly gave her the expected answer. Community matters. People come together. The holidays bring out kindness. Instead, I looked around the room. Caleb was sitting on the floor helping Amari rewrap a present she'd accidentally opened. Walter was drinking coffee from a foam cup. Tasha was braiding her daughter's hair. Angela stood beside the plumber, one hand pressed against her lower back while she listened to his explanation. And I thought about my dining room in Carmel. 6 plates. One of them mine. Sometimes the holiday you planned disappears. I said, you just try to matter wherever you end up. Camille nodded. Thank you. Then they packed the equipment and left. I assumed that would be the end of my Christmas Eve story. I was wrong. Things had been unraveling at home without me. Lily told me the details later. Shortly after our phone call, she'd confronted Daniel in the kitchen. You told Laura that Noah and I wanted her gone? Daniel lowered his voice. I never said it that way. Then how did you say it? I said tonight might be easier. For whom? He told her Paige already felt uncomfortable. That was when Paige walked into the kitchen. I'm uncomfortable about what? Nobody answered immediately. Finally, Lily said it. Dad told Laura not to come home tonight because you're here. Paige stared at Daniel. You did what? Daniel gave an awkward laugh. You said being here felt strange. I said coming into Laura's house for Christmas felt strange. I didn't tell you to remove her from her own house. I didn't remove anybody. Paige slowly looked toward the dining room. Then where is she? According to Lily, Daniel had nothing to say for several seconds. And when Daniel felt cornered, he had a predictable habit. He stopped discussing what he'd done and started describing what was wrong with the person questioning him. Laura controls everything anyway, he said. Paige frowned. What does that mean? The money, the calendar, where we go, what we buy, everything becomes her decision. Lily interrupted. She pays the bills because you hate doing it. That's not the point. Paige studied him. Then she said something Lily remembered exactly. Do you know what's interesting? Daniel didn't answer. You used to tell everybody I was the reason you could never move forward. His face changed. Paige continued. New wife, same explanation. Nobody spoke after that. Around 11, Lily's phone buzzed. One of her coworkers had sent her a message. Isn't that Laura on Channel 8? They turned on the television. The report was nearly over, so Lily rewound it. There was Maple Street Family Center. The broken annex. Families carrying bags into other rooms. Angela explaining how the cold had complicated the repairs. Then there was me. First, carrying a box down the hallway. Then handing coffee to Walter. Then Camille explaining that volunteers had helped keep the shelter running while emergency repairs were arranged. Finally, my face appeared. Sometimes the holiday you planned disappears. You just try to matter wherever you end up. Nobody sitting in my dining room needed to ask why my holiday plans had changed. They knew. At 12:14 Christmas morning, my phone rang. I was folding chairs. Daniel. I nearly let it go to voicemail. Then I answered. Hello. Silence. Laura? Yes. Another pause. His voice wasn't angry. It wasn't apologetic either. Mostly, he sounded confused. Why are you on television? Behind him, I could hear voices. Lily. Maybe Noah. The television. They were all still there. And suddenly I realized what Daniel was actually asking. Not why reporters had come to Maple Street. He wanted to know how the woman he'd decided was inconvenient had somehow ended up in a place where people were grateful she existed. Because somebody needed another pair of hands tonight. Laura, Merry Christmas, Daniel. I ended the call. My hand shook afterward. I wish I could say I felt powerful. Mostly, I felt exhausted. And sad. About 10 seconds later, my phone rang again. Lily. Something in me told me to answer. Hey. Her voice was quieter now. Unsteady. Laura, Mom just told me something. I stopped folding the chair in front of me. What? Apparently Dad has been talking about you for months. My stomach tightened. What do you mean, talking about me? She hesitated. Like you're the reason he's miserable. I barely slept. By the time I left Maple Street, the pipe was contained, every family had somewhere warm to sleep, and Angela had promised me repeatedly that the shelter would reimburse my card the second their treasurer reappeared. Instead of driving home, I checked into a modest hotel near downtown. At 7:10 Christmas morning, I woke to the heater rattling underneath the window. For a few seconds, I forgot where I was. Then I saw the overnight bag sitting on the chair. Everything returned at once. Daniel. Paige. The television report. Lily's call. I brewed coffee in the tiny machine beside the television and sat on the edge of the bed. Christmas mornings at our house had always been loud. Daniel asking where the spare batteries were even though they had lived in the same drawer for 11 years. Lily stealing bacon before breakfast. Noah insisting stockings were childish and then checking his before anybody else. That morning, I had powdered creamer, a paper cup, and silence. That was when I cried. There was no dramatic breakdown. I just sat there drinking bad hotel coffee while tears rolled down my face. I missed them. That was the inconvenient part. Being angry doesn't automatically erase love. At 7:36, Daniel texted. Can we please not destroy 11 years over one terrible Christmas Eve? I read it twice. What bothered me wasn't what he wrote. It was everything he didn't. He didn't say, I'm sorry I asked you to leave. He didn't say, I'm sorry I lied to the kids. He didn't say, I'm sorry I made you look like the one who chose this. His concern was that the marriage might be destroyed. As though our marriage were a piece of glass sitting between us and I was the only person holding something heavy. I turned my phone face down. Around 9, Lily called. Did I wake you? No. Mom told me more. I looked through the hotel window. All right. She said Dad has been calling her for months. My first thought was affair. I am not proud of it. But it was the first place my mind went. My stomach dropped. Lily heard my silence. Not like that, she said quickly. Mom was very clear, nothing romantic. I could breathe again. Then why has he been calling her? To complain about you. That hurt differently. According to Paige, Daniel had built an entire version of our marriage I barely recognized. I controlled our money. I decided where we went. I prevented him from helping Noah and Lily. I resented Paige. I dismissed his career ideas. I criticized his spending. The stories worked because each one contained a small piece of truth. I did manage our household finances. Daniel hated budgets, passwords, statements, insurance renewals, and almost anything requiring paperwork. I did manage our calendar. Once, Daniel accidentally booked a golf weekend on the same Saturday as his mother's 70th birthday dinner. I did question major purchases. Because married people generally discuss major purchases when they share income, retirement plans, and a mortgage. But in Daniel's version, all context disappeared. Responsibility became control. Lily, I said, I need you out of this now. But. I mean it, you've told me what I needed to know. Are you coming home today? I don't know yet. After we hung up, I opened our banking app. Not to withdraw money. Not to freeze accounts. I simply wanted to look. Several transactions stood out. A $1,200 transfer. Another for $900. Several smaller amounts across the previous months. I recognized the recipients. Noah. Lily. I called Noah. He answered cautiously. Merry Christmas. Despite everything, I laughed. Merry Christmas. Then I asked, did your father give you $1,200 when your transmission needed work? Silence. Yeah. Why didn't you mention it? He said it was from him. That answered more than he realized. I'm not angry at you. You sound angry. I'm married to your father. You are a separate category. He gave a weak laugh. I called Lily again. The $900 had helped with moving expenses. Again, I probably would have agreed to both. That wasn't the issue. Daniel had secretly used our joint money to help his children while simultaneously telling Paige that I prevented him from helping them. He wanted me to carry responsibility for our finances. He simply didn't want accountability for decisions he made inside them. By noon, I couldn't sit in that hotel room anymore. I showered, changed clothes, and drove home. Noah's SUV was still in the driveway. Paige's rental car was there too. Apparently, nobody had felt comfortable enough to leave. When I opened the front door, the house smelled like coffee and leftover ham. Paige stood first. Laura. Hi. I think I owe you an apology. I placed my overnight bag beside the stairs. Did you ask Daniel to make me leave? No. Then that isn't your apology to make. Daniel came out of the kitchen. He looked as though he hadn't slept. Can we talk somewhere private? No. His eyebrows rose. Laura. If we're discussing why I wasn't allowed to spend Christmas in my own home. We're past pretending this is a private little misunderstanding. Nobody moved. I took off my coat. Then I looked directly at Daniel. Did Noah ask you to tell me to leave? No. Did Lily? No. Did Paige? His eyes moved toward her. Paige did not save him. No. I nodded. Then whose idea was it? His jaw tightened. Mine. There it was. Clean. Simple. No place left to hide. Daniel immediately began explaining. I believed it would make the evening easier. You've been tense lately, Laura, and if we're being truthful, you do manage everything around here. Paige made a small sound. Not quite a laugh. Daniel turned. What? She leaned back in the chair. Nothing. No, say it. She looked at him. You used to tell people I was the reason you couldn't get anywhere. Paige, please. She glanced at me. Then back at him. Different woman, same story. The room went silent. And for the first time, I saw Daniel's behavior from somewhere outside our marriage. Not as an isolated argument. As a pattern. Then Noah put down his coffee cup. Dad, tell her the other reason you wanted Mom here. Daniel's head snapped around. Stay out of this. No. Noah's voice was surprisingly steady. You put all of us in it. I looked between them. What is he talking about? Daniel said nothing. Noah shook his head. It wasn't only Christmas dinner. My stomach tightened. Then he looked at me. Dad wanted us to help change your mind about something. For a moment, I assumed he meant Paige. Maybe Daniel wanted her to visit more often now that she'd moved back to Indiana. Maybe he wanted her staying with us temporarily. I was wrong. Change my mind about what? Daniel rubbed both hands over his face. Noah, this isn't the time. Noah looked around the dining room. When exactly would be better? Nobody answered. Finally, Daniel pulled out a chair. Sit down, Laura. I'd rather stand. He exhaled. I've been looking at a business investment. That sentence told me immediately where we were going. Scott Delaney. Daniel looked surprised. You know about Scott? Of course I know about Scott. You showed me his projections in October. Paige lowered her coffee mug. Scott Delaney? Daniel ignored her. Scott owned a small commercial HVAC supply company and wanted money to expand. Daniel had worked in HVAC sales for years, and I understood why he liked the idea. He was 57. He was tired of regional meetings, sales targets, quarterly reviews, and managers 15 years younger asking why he hadn't updated customer notes in software he despised. Scott was offering him something emotionally attractive. Ownership. A chance to stop working for someone else. I had never mocked that dream. The problem was the price. The buy-in was approximately $85,000. Scott's numbers also assumed growth that looked overly optimistic to me. Daniel wanted to pull part of the investment from retirement savings. The rest would come from a home equity line. Our home. I had told him exactly where I stood. If you decide to risk money that's legally yours, that is ultimately your decision, but I will not sign paperwork putting our house behind those projections. Now Daniel looked at me. You killed the idea before we had a real conversation. We talked for 2 hours. Because you'd already decided. Yes, I had decided I wasn't borrowing against our home for it. Daniel glanced at Noah. It was tiny. But I caught it. I turned toward Noah. What did your father tell you? Noah hesitated. That you wouldn't let him invest. Daniel cut in. That isn't inaccurate. And? Noah looked uncomfortable. That you were being excessively cautious and wouldn't hear him out. I looked at Lily. Her face told me she'd heard the same thing. Then I turned to Paige. Why did he want you here? She shook her head. I didn't know this was part of his plan. Daniel leaned forward. I just wanted people who understand me to hear my side. And suddenly Christmas Eve made perfect sense. Paige wasn't there only because she was Noah and Lily's mother. Daniel wanted an audience. One that did not include me. Paige had historically been more comfortable with financial risk than I was. Daniel knew that. He expected her to encourage him. Then perhaps Noah would agree. Then Lily. Afterward, he could return to me not with one opinion but 4. Not Daniel thinks Laura is wrong. Everybody thinks Laura is wrong. You planned to discuss Scott's business last night. Daniel said nothing. You removed me from my own table so you could discuss our finances without me. They're my children. And Paige is your ex-wife. This affects my future. It affects my house. Our house, he said sharply. Exactly. That stopped him. Paige finally spoke. Wait. We both looked at her. This is Scott Delaney we're discussing? Yes, Daniel said. The smoothie guy? Noah frowned. What smoothie guy? I had no idea either. Paige almost smiled. Back around 2010, Scott tried to convince your father to buy into one of those mall smoothie kiosk franchises. Daniel groaned. That was completely different. Paige tilted her head. You said those exact words then too. Lily laughed once before quickly covering her mouth. I shouldn't have found it funny. I did. Then I looked back at Daniel. You didn't need me gone because Paige felt awkward. Laura. You needed me absent because it is much harder to lie about someone when they're sitting 3 feet away. Daniel stared at me. No one defended him. For the first time, I saw shame cross his face. I wasn't lying. You told your children I volunteered to leave. Silence. You told Paige I prevent you from helping Noah and Lily while you transferred money from our joint account without discussing it with me. His eyes flicked toward Noah. And now I discover you wanted everyone at the table discussing a loan against our home while I was sleeping in a hotel. Daniel's face changed. I finally sat because my legs had begun trembling, and I didn't want anyone to notice. There is another piece of this. He frowned. What now? In September, I asked you to go to marriage counseling. Lily looked toward her father. Daniel shifted. I remember. You told me we didn't need a stranger judging our relationship. That isn't exactly what It's close enough. I looked around the table. Apparently strangers weren't the problem. You simply wanted to choose the jury. Paige looked down at her coffee cup. Daniel didn't smile. So what are you saying? I'm leaving for a while. His expression changed instantly. What? I'll rent something furnished. For how long? I don't know. Laura. Come on. And I'm finished running your personal life. He stared at me. What does that even mean? It means your appointments are yours. Your bills are yours. Gifts for your family are yours. Your mother's birthday is yours. Your work travel is yours. If you need to tell your children something, you call them yourself. If something needs to be remembered for you, you remember it. You're punishing me. No. My voice was calmer than I felt. I'm returning your life to you. He actually looked offended. I continued. I will continue paying my portion of our legitimate household obligations. I am not emptying accounts. I am not abandoning responsibilities. But I will not sign anything related to Scott's company. And our home will not secure that investment. Daniel leaned back. So everybody is against me now. Paige gave him a tired look. Nobody is against you. It certainly feels that way. You've spent years complaining that Laura handles everything. She gestured toward me. Now she's telling you to handle yourself. Then she asked quietly, why does that frighten you so much? Nobody laughed. Lily walked around the table and stood beside me. I'm sorry. You have nothing to apologize for. I should have called you yesterday morning. Your father never should have put you in that position. Noah rubbed his hands together. You know you're still the person I call when everything goes sideways. Right? I smiled at him. I know. So that doesn't change? I love you, Noah. If you call, I'll answer. Then I looked toward Daniel. I just won't keep doing your father's half of life for him. Daniel watched me. Are you seriously leaving tonight? At Christmas? There it was again. Christmas. One terrible evening. One mistake. As though the problem had begun at 6:12 the previous morning. I stood. Picked up my overnight bag. Then looked around the room I had decorated for the holiday I had been asked not to attend. No, Daniel, Christmas didn't cause this. I met his eyes. It just turned the lights on. This time when I left the house, Daniel did not look relieved. 3 days after Christmas, I rented a furnished apartment in Fishers. 3rd floor. Beige carpet. Tiny balcony. A kitchen apparently designed for someone whose entire cooking repertoire involved a microwave. I signed a 3-month lease. Daniel apparently expected me back sooner. On my second night there, he called. You actually rented an apartment? Yes. I thought when you said you needed space, you meant a few days. I told you I didn't know how long. There was a pause. Then he asked, what am I supposed to tell people? That question told me we still had significant work ahead of us. Tell them whatever you want. You've had practice. The second I said it, I regretted it. Not because it was completely false. Because I didn't want our separation to become a contest over who could deliver the sharper sentence. So I added, actually, tell them the truth. He didn't respond. The first few weeks were not empowering. People rarely mention that part when they talk about boundaries. You don't set one and wake up the next morning glowing with peace. Sometimes you wake at 2:08 a.m. in a strange bedroom and wonder whether you have destroyed your life. I missed my kitchen. My bed. My neighborhood. I even missed Daniel's habit of watching forecasts from 3 local stations as though one meteorologist might negotiate better weather. Twice, I nearly packed everything and went home. Each time, I made myself answer one question. What has changed? At first, the answer was nothing. So I stayed. Then Daniel began discovering adulthood in small installments. His mother's birthday arrived in January. For 11 years, I had made the dinner reservation. Bought the card. Reminded him to call his brother. Ordered the cake. That year, I did none of it. At 4:15 that afternoon, my phone rang. Daniel. Where did you make Mom's reservation? I didn't. Silence. Oh. You should probably start calling restaurants. You always handle it. I know. Another silence. Then something surprising happened. He said, okay. He found a restaurant. It wasn't his mother's favorite. Nobody died. Several weeks later, Daniel ordered Lily's birthday gift and accidentally shipped it to her old address. He solved that too. Then an insurance notice arrived. He called. What am I supposed to do with this? Have you read it? The beginning. Read the second paragraph. I waited. Oh. What? It tells me what to do. Excellent. I didn't hang up on him. I didn't mock him. I also didn't fix it for him. That difference mattered. One afternoon, Noah called Daniel looking for an old insurance document. Daniel automatically said, "Ask Laura." According to Noah, there was a long pause afterward. Then Noah said, "Dad." Just that. Daniel found the document himself. None of these things were tragedies. They were ordinary pieces of being an adult. For the first month, Daniel mostly experienced my absence as inconvenience. Then something changed. He stopped calling every time he couldn't find a password or form. More importantly, he began correcting things I had never asked him to correct. One Sunday afternoon, Lily called. "Dad told Noah and me something today." I braced myself. "What?" "He said you never stopped him from helping us." I sat down. "He told us those transfers came from the joint account and that he should have discussed them with you." I didn't answer. "He also said he made you sound controlling because he didn't want to admit you were the one keeping track of everything." That affected me more than almost anything Daniel had said directly to me. Because I hadn't been there. He wasn't trying to win me back in that moment. He wasn't performing repentance where I could reward him for it. 6 weeks into our separation, Daniel called. "I found a counselor." That surprised me. "You did?" "Yes." "Why?" He was quiet for a second. "Because apparently asking my wife where everything is isn't a functional marriage strategy." I laughed before I could stop myself. It was the first genuine laugh we'd shared since before Christmas. I agreed to go. Our counselor was Dr. Elaine Brooks, a woman in her late 50s who had a remarkable ability to let silence do uncomfortable work for her. During our first session, Daniel said, "I made one incredibly stupid decision on Christmas Eve." Dr. Brooks looked at him. "Which one?" Daniel frowned. "Asking Laura to leave." "What about telling your children leaving was her choice?" He shifted. "And what about arranging a family discussion about shared financial risk while your wife was absent?" Another pause. "And what about describing her accountability as control when you benefited from the work she was doing?" Daniel stared down at his hands. Normally, this was where he would argue over wording. That afternoon, he didn't. Finally, he nodded. "All right." Dr. Brooks waited. Daniel took a breath. It wasn't one decision. That was the first apology I believed. Not because he said the word sorry. Because he finally understood what required an apology. He also hired an independent accountant to review Scott Delaney's business proposal. I did not choose the accountant. I did not attend the meeting. I didn't even ask to see the report. 3 weeks later, Daniel met me for lunch. He looked annoyed before he sat down. "The accountant says Scott's revenue projections are aggressive." I took a sip of iced tea. "Really? He thinks the reserves are too thin." "You don't say." "And apparently using home equity at our age for this particular deal would add unnecessary risk." I pressed my lips together. Daniel pointed at me. "Don't. I'm not doing anything. You're saying plenty with your face." I looked innocent. Finally, he sighed. "You were right." I held out my hand. "I'd like that documented." He stared at me. Then he picked up a paper napkin, borrowed my pen, and wrote, "Laura was right about Scott." He signed his name beneath it. I still have that napkin. Meanwhile, Maple Street repaired the damaged annex. The television segment brought in donations. A local construction company offered materials at a reduced price. Several businesses donated blankets, appliances, and food. For about 2 months afterward, strangers occasionally recognized me. One afternoon, I was standing beside the tomatoes at Kroger when an older gentleman pointed. "You're the Christmas shelter woman." I groaned. "Please don't call me that." He smiled. "Too late." I laughed halfway to the dairy aisle. Paige and I did not suddenly become best friends. Real life doesn't wrap everything in a television bow. But at Lily's birthday dinner in March, Paige pulled me aside. "I should have asked where you were that Christmas Eve." "You didn't know." "I should have asked more questions long before that." I looked at her. She nodded toward Daniel across the room. He has a way of making his version sound extremely reasonable. Yes. I watched him talking with Noah. Until everybody compares notes. At the end of my 3-month lease, I extended it for 1 additional month. Daniel didn't complain. That mattered too. By late April, I decided to move home. Not because everything had been magically repaired. It hadn't. We were still seeing Dr. Brooks. Daniel was handling his own obligations. We had divided household responsibilities in a way we probably should have done years earlier. He managed his family calendar. I managed mine. We both had access to finances, and substantial transfers required discussion. Neither of us acted as the other's personal assistant. The week before I returned, I told him, coming home isn't the finish line. I know. This time, I believed he understood. The following Christmas, Lily hosted. 3 weeks beforehand, she sent me a text. "You're coming, right?" I wrote back. "Are you asking me or issuing instructions?" Her response appeared immediately. "Instructions, and bring the green bean casserole." Daniel was sitting across from me when I smiled at my phone. "What?" I showed him. He laughed. Then he looked at me for several seconds. "I'm glad you're going." "So am I." And I meant it. For years, I believed holding a family together meant noticing every loose thread before anybody else did and quietly tying it back into place. Remember the birthday. Pay the bill. Make the reservation. Smooth over the argument. Keep the calendar. Call the child. Send the gift. Save the receipt. Fix the problem before anybody even realizes there was one. I thought that was love. Some of it was. But I eventually learned that when one person carries too much for too long, the people around them can forget they're carrying anything at all. Sometimes they don't understand the weight until you finally put it down. And sometimes the person most surprised by your absence is the one who spent years complaining that your presence was too much. That Christmas Eve, Daniel thought removing me would make everything easier. Instead, it revealed exactly how much of our life had depended on me being there. And more importantly, it taught me something I should have understood years earlier. Being needed is not the same thing as being valued. Love does not require you to disappear so everyone else can remain comfortable. And setting something down doesn't always mean you're abandoning it. Sometimes it is the only way to find out who else is willing to carry their share. If you've ever been the person quietly keeping a family functioning, you probably understand how invisible that work can become. Sometimes the only way people finally see it is when you stop doing it for them.